Sara Gilbert's life has often been viewed through the lens of her most famous role, Darlene Conner on Roseanne, but her story is far richer and more complex than a single television character. Rising to fame at a young age, Sara became a familiar face in American households during the late 1980s and early 1990s. While audiences admired her sharp wit and deadpan humor, few understood the personal struggles unfolding behind the scenes. Born into a Hollywood family with a towering creative legacy, Sara grew up surrounded by success, expectations, and constant comparison. From an early age, she learned that achievement was assumed, not celebrated. As she navigated fame, identity, love, a loss, and self-discovery under intense public scrutiny, Sara's journey became one of quiet resilience rather than easy triumph. Her story is not just about celebrity, but about survival, self-acceptance, and learning to live authentically. Growing up in Hollywood's long shadow, born Sara Rebecca Abeles on January 29, 1975 in Santa Monica, California, Sara was immersed in the entertainment world from birth. Her mother, Barbara Cowan, worked as a producer and talent manager, while her grandfather, Harry Crane, was the creator of the legendary sitcom The Honeymooners. Creativity and success were woven into her family's DNA, but so were unspoken expectations. Growing up in such an environment brought privilege, yet it also created emotional distance. Sara often felt isolated, struggling to define herself outside her family's accomplishments. Hollywood wasn't just a career path, it was the air she breathed. Even as a child, she sensed the pressure to measure up, to prove her worth in an industry that rarely allowed room for vulnerability. This early exposure to fame shaped her ambition, but also planted seeds of self-doubt that followed her well into adulthood. Early acting and the burden of proving herself. Sara's acting career began almost as soon as she could walk, with her first appearance in a Kool-Aid commercial at just 5 years old. While many children might have found such experiences exciting, for Sara, work quickly became routine. She was removed from traditional schooling and tutored privately, a decision that protected her schedule but limited her social development. Seeking to establish her own identity, she later adopted the last name Gilbert, taken from her mother's first husband, distancing herself from her birth name and the weight it carried. Complicating matters further was the success of her older siblings, Melissa and Jonathan Gilbert, who had already built recognizable careers. Comparisons were unavoidable. Rather than discouraging her, however, these pressures hardened Sara's determination. Acting became not just a job, but a way to validate her independence and prove she deserved her place in Hollywood on her own terms, becoming Darlene Conner and a teenage icon. At just 13 years old, Sara landed the role that would define her career, Darlene Conner on Roseanne. The character's sarcasm, intelligence, and emotional depth resonated deeply with audiences, and Sara's performance felt effortless and authentic. As the show skyrocketed in popularity, Darlene became one of television's most beloved characters. Sara earned critical acclaim, multiple Young Artist Awards, and Emmy nominations, all before she turned 20. Yet success came at a cost. While her peers navigated adolescence in relative privacy, Sara did so in front of millions. Fame amplified her natural shyness and intensified her anxiety. She often felt overwhelmed by attention and struggled to reconcile her public persona with her private self. Despite these challenges, she maintained remarkable discipline, balancing her demanding filming schedule while later enrolling at Yale University, determined to cultivate a life beyond television. Living under pressure. While growing up on camera, the teenage years are challenging for anyone, but for Sara Gilbert, they unfolded under relentless public observation. Every phase of her growth, emotional, physical, and intellectual, was scrutinized by fans and media alike. While Roseanne thrived, Sara often felt disconnected from the joy audiences associated with her success. Fame brought expectations to always perform, always succeed, and never falter. She internalized these pressures, leading to feelings of loneliness and emotional exhaustion. The contrast between her sharp, confident on-screen character and her quiet, introspective real-life personality became increasingly stark. Yet Sara persisted, driven by responsibility and professionalism. She rarely complained, choosing instead to push forward. This endurance would become a defining trait throughout her life, allowing her to survive situations that might have overwhelmed others, even as it quietly took a toll on her mental well-being. Identity, love, and a quiet inner struggle. Behind the scenes of her rising career, Sara was grappling with deeply personal questions about her identity. During her time on Roseanne, she entered a relationship with co-star Johnny Galecki. Though the relationship was caring and supportive, Sara began to feel an unexplained discomfort that forced her into difficult self-reflection. Gradually, she came to understand that she was gay, a realization that brought both clarity and fear. At the time, Hollywood was far less accepting of LGBTQ actors, and Sara worried about professional repercussions. She chose privacy over openness, confiding only in Johnny, who remained a trusted ally. The emotional complexity of loving someone while realizing they could not fulfill her truth was painful, but formative. Years later, when Sara publicly came out in 2010, she credited Johnny's kindness and support as instrumental in helping her survive that confusing and vulnerable period. Motherhood, long-term love, and painful separation. In adulthood, Sara sought stability and emotional grounding through family. She spent a decade in a committed relationship with television writer Allison Adler, and together they welcomed 2 children, Levi Hank and Sawyer Jane. Motherhood became one of the most meaningful roles in Sara's life, offering purpose beyond fame. However, the end of her relationship with Allison in 2011 marked a devastating chapter. Sara spoke openly about the heartbreak, admitting how difficult it was to balance public success with private grief. Despite their separation, the two remained respectful co-parents, prioritizing their children's well-being. Still, the emotional toll was immense. For someone who valued privacy, processing such pain in the public eye was exhausting. The experience reinforced how deeply intertwined Sara's personal and professional lives had become, and how costly that entanglement could be. Marriage, loss, and professional turmoil. Sara later found love again with musician Linda Perry, and their relationship quickly became intense and public. They married in 2014 and welcomed a son, Rhodes Emilio, through adoption. For a time, Sara seemed to have found equilibrium, yet by 2019, the marriage ended due to irreconcilable differences, leaving her emotionally shattered. Around the same time, she was still carrying the grief of losing former Roseanne co-star Glenn Quinn, whose death in 2002 deeply affected her. Professionally, another blow came when the Roseanne revival was abruptly canceled following Roseanne Barr's racist tweet. Sara publicly condemned the behavior, distancing herself despite personal and professional fallout. The convergence of loss, controversy, and emotional exhaustion forced Sara to confront how much she had been carrying and how urgently she needed to heal. Stepping back to reclaim balance and health. By 2019, the demands of Sara's career, particularly her role as co-host on The Talk, became unsustainable. Raising 3 children, managing public scrutiny, and processing personal trauma had left her depleted. Choosing herself for once, Sara stepped away from the show, acknowledging that her life was out of balance. The decision was not easy, but it was necessary. She turned inward, prioritizing therapy, physical health, and emotional recovery. Exploring both traditional and alternative treatments, she worked to address long-standing trauma and grief. For someone who had spent most of her life meeting expectations, this act of self-preservation was revolutionary. It marked a shift from survival to intentional living, allowing Sara to redefine success not by visibility or accolades, but by peace and presence. Conclusion: resilience, growth, and a quieter strength. Sara Gilbert's journey is not a story of effortless fame, but of perseverance through relentless pressure, personal loss, and profound self-discovery. From a child actor born into legacy to a woman determined to live authentically, her life reflects the complexity of growing up in the spotlight while trying to remain human. She has faced heartbreak, identity struggles, public controversy, and grief, yet continues to move forward with quiet strength. Today, Sara prioritizes her children, her health, and a more grounded sense of purpose. Her story resonates not because it is glamorous, but because it is honest. In choosing healing over visibility and authenticity over expectation, Sara Gilbert has redefined what success looks like on her own terms.